All right. We should be live of the YouTube page. Hey, what's going on, T Felder? Make sure I get this correct. All right, so I think we're live. Welcome back to the Black Brain Trust. This is episode 296, Economics. Hit the like button as you come in, share the video if possible, and hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust. And let me get the docket together so that we can get started. Make sure my volume is up. I don't think anybody can hear me. All right, it's 8 o'clock. We're gonna go ahead and get started anyways. I don't see many people in the chat, so I'm not gonna wait on anybody anymore. We'll just get started. If you want to join the panel, make sure you raise your hand when the link is dropped so we can acknowledge you and promote you to the panel. All right, let me drop this in there. All right, let's go, man. All right, first item on the docket is from Fox Business. Here's why a majority of millennials are rejected for loans and credit cards. Approximately 58% of the millennials have been rejected for at least one financial product, a new survey has found. The reason, according to the bankrate.com report published Wednesday, is because of their credit score. Meanwhile, the survey found that 53% of the Generation X people aged between 39 and 54 and 27% of baby boomers aged between 55 and 73 have been denied for a financial product. An unintended consequence of the Card Act, which went into effect in 2010, is that it has become much harder for people in their early and mid 20s to obtain credit. Bankrate credit card industry analyst Ted Rossman said in the report. Establishing credit is a lot like getting started in your career. Everyone wants you to have experience, but it's hard to get that first experience, Rossman added. The financial products people are most likely to be denied because of their credit score and a credit score are credit cards and car loans. The survey found. It also found that 36% of the respondents making less than $40,000 were denied a credit card, as opposed to 22% of the respondents with an income of 80,000 or more. The study also found that 44% of men felt their credit score is important to them, while 53% of women said the same. Bankrate.com commissioned YouGov PLC to conduct the study, which was undertaken in July. Of the 2,498 adults who were surveyed online, 2,106 reported they had been denied a financial service or product, Bankrate said. So it doesn't talk about race too. Race should actually play a factor into this, which is interesting because there's no credit scores are very synthetic. So it's not like this is an actual true testament to a person's ability to be responsible with credit. What's happening here is that the credit score is kind of volatile. I would say it's just as volatile as something like cryptocurrency. So you pay off um, some debts, such as a credit card or a recurring a recurring account every 30 days, and then the score changes. So if you apply for a credit card on the first of the month and on the first of August, but your credit score changed on September 1st, you were rejected for that financial product, but because of what the previous month credit score was. So if the credit score changes in September, after September 1st, then you may be approved for that product. This sort of volatility is what's creating the sort of benchmarks that we're seeing in the article, and I think that the credit score thing is a Ponzi scheme. I think it should be they should do away with it by and large. It doesn't seem to be really benefiting anybody. Everybody's working, and especially in an unstable economy, um, your credit score is going to fluctuate. I don't care who you are. As long as you're making less than $40,000 a year, your credit score is never going to be enough for these financial products and services that these institutions are putting out there. So what's the point? Hey, what's going on, Dollar?
Man, I'm trying to get it together on Zoom, man. Can
Hmm.
you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you fine.
Yeah, I'm trying to catch up. Go for it, man. I'll catch up eventually. I'm having some technical issues.
Yeah. Um, yeah. So these financial products and services seem to think that using the credit score is the only barometer that can be used. I think that there can be other methods of use. I think that um, work duration. So even if you did work at Home Depot, Dunkin' Donuts, Target, I think that should play a factor too, rather than just the credit score itself. Um, let's say college enrollment or something like that, post-secondary education. Um, what were your grades? Grades are more indicative of responsibility than, let's say, a credit score. Um, if you don't have any credit, then there's no real way to determine your ability to be responsible in that area because there's no previous history. Whereas, at least with uh, um, grades in post-secondary education, that's actually a barometer of a meritocracy, right? You can determine whether or not a person is performing or not. So I think other areas other areas outside of credit scores can actually play a role in boosting someone's ability to access financial services and products. Health is also a factor. If you had bad health, there's a probability that you may not pay off your credit card. You may actually pay for the medical services over a credit card. So that may be why you fell delinquent in those financial products, because you put your health over your over your credit score and your financial debts. There's a variety of things that should play a role in determining a person's ability to have access to financial services and products. And if that's going to be the case, that they're going to deny these people, then we need to offer an alternative to those mega institutions. Um, and I don't think Western Union and Checks Cash is an alternative to those financial services and products. In fact, I think those products should be banned, because they're predatory in their practice. All right, let me get to the next article. All right, this one is from CNBC.com. New recession warning: the rich aren't spending. Interesting, they put a Lamborghini up there. The rich have cut their spending on everything from homes to jewelry, sparking fears of a trickle down recession that starts at the top. From real estate and retail stores to classic cars and art, the weakest segment of the American economy right now is the very top. While the middle class and broader consumer sections continue to spend, economists say the sudden pullback among the wealthy could cascade down to the rest of the economy and create further drag on growth. Luxury real estate is having its worst year since the financial crisis, with pricey markets like Manhattan seeing 6 straight quarters of sales declines. According to Redfin, sales of home prices at $1.5 million or more fell 5% in the US in the second quarter. Unsold mansions and penthouses are piling up across the country, especially in ritzy resort towns, with nearly 3 year supply of luxury listings in Aspen, Colorado, and the Hamptons in New York. Retailers of the 1% are faring the worst, or faring the worst, with famed Barney's filing for bankruptcy and Nordstrom posting 3 consecutive quarterly declines in revenue. Meanwhile, Walmart and Target, which cater to the everyday consumer, are reporting stronger than expected traffic and growth. At this month's massive Pebble Beach car auctions, known for smashing price records, the most expensive cars faltered on the auction block. Less than half of the cars offered for $1 million or more were able to sell, but cars priced at under $75,000 sold quickly, many for far more than their estimates. In the first half of 2019, art auction sales were down for the first time in years. Sales at Sotheby's dropped 10%, and Christie's auction sales were down 22% from a year ago. There are many reasons for spending declines. Tax changes, for instance, are to blame for some of the real estate slump, and parts of the high end economy have retained their shine, from luxury new car sales to Swiss watches and fashion. Yet recent data suggests that the US wealthy are beginning to shut their wallets. If their spending falls further, the broader economy could start to feel the pain. The top 10% of earners account for nearly half of all consumer outlays, according to Mark Zandi, chief economist at Moody's Analytics. But their spending has fallen over the past 2 years, while spending for the middle class has accelerated. If high income consumers pull back any further on their spending, it will be a significant threat to the economic expansion, Zandi said. The savings of the rich has also exploded, more than doubling over the past 2 years, suggesting that the wealthy are hoarding cash. The middle earners, or those in the 40% to 89.9% of the income distribution, have largely picked up the spending slack from the rich. If job growth slows any further, unemployment will begin to rise, will pack it in, resulting in an economic downturn, Zandy said. There are two main reasons for the wealth slump: volatile markets and slowing global growth. The top 10% own over 80% of stocks in the US, so they are far more sensitive to the recent swings in stocks and bonds. Also, because many of the wealthy also own companies that do business overseas or have foreign exposure, they have become an early warning system for the economic storms forming around the world. The middle class consumer, however, is being buoyed up by strong employment and a relatively stable housing market. A US economy that for over a decade has been defined by the rich reaping the gains and fueling the spending has now flipped. Now it's the main street that is prospering, while the investor class is signaling a consumer recession. This rich, the rich still have plenty of wealth to spend, but spending at the top is driven by confidence and certainty. And right now, they are finding little of either in the global stock markets and trade war. So this is interesting. We talked about this before that Bentley, Lamborghini, Mercedes, BMW, those top tier brands have not been moving vehicles. Um, they saw slowdown year over year since this guy has come into office, and I think that's a part of the issue where people don't feel confident about the market because why buy a new car? Why even buy some of these items that, to be quite frank, is not a big leap over what you currently have. Flat screen TVs. What's the point in buying a 65-inch if my 55-inch is doing just fine? Unless I want to watch the Dallas Cowboys lose or something, on something bigger. But the point that I'm making here is that the people who have the ability to spend are just not spending because they don't see any reason to. On top of the, compounded with the fact that they're not confident in the market and the volatility, they're just not seeing any reason to. But obviously, people, your everyday consumer, like the article said, spending is actually in traffic is actually much higher, considerably in comparison to your top 10%, top 12%. Yeah, that's because people have to spend their money. They live paycheck to paycheck, as well as they need those consumer staples. They need to go to Whole Foods. They need to go to Trader Joe's. They have to go to Piggly Wiggly. You can't just ignore common consumer staples when it comes to your 40% to your 80% of income distribution. Darla, you have anything to add to this?
I think you nailed it. It's a small pie. You start talking about items for the rich. It's a very small number of people that can afford those things. I think the tragic part will be as the prices of those luxury items come down, and they have to come down. People who always aspired to have those things are gonna, buy them secondhand. So you're gonna have people buying used Lamborghinis and things like that. The way that the way historically brothers have, purchased used S-Class. Well, you're gonna see like even higher end things now, and things that we can't really afford the maintenance on. So we have to not fall for that trap.
Well, I mean, Acura is seeing sales growth year over year, but maybe Mercedes and BMW are not, for that very reason. Although they're both luxury vehicles, they cater to two different demographics. Right. Acuras are really meant for working class people, and BMW and Mercedes hit above that threshold.
Right. So yeah, it's going to be important for everybody at every level. Going to have to be responsible with what they have. So even the lot of brothers and sisters out here making a quarter of a million, 300,000, over that $200,000 threshold. They're gonna have to resist the temptation to buy something that uh they're gonna have to resist the temptation to buy something that they want that but don't need. And in a world where everything is going to get cheaper, for,
Mhm,
they'll be able to get it. They'll be able to buy it, but they may not be able to afford it.
mhm.
If that's making sense.
You're right. You can't sustain it over long periods of time.
Yeah. So that goes for the Mac mansions also. So
Oh yeah.
like the uber rich, they sell their Mac mansion, and so someone on the way up, they think, well, this is my chance. Well, maybe you need not buy it. Also, if the rich can't afford it, maybe you can't afford it either.
All of the market trends are saying, looming recession. Wherever the trajectory is coming from. Um, Maybe buying a house at this point in August of 2019 is not the best option right now. Not the best choice. You might want to wait till December. Might want to wait
Yeah,
till
yeah.
January.
I'm definitely in that camp. You're gonna. I mean, today, between today and yesterday, the dollar broke a trend line for there was a downtrend, sloping downtrend since April, late April, when the dollar had been declining. So it broke that trend to either it was today or late yesterday. So all of the technical flares are starting to go off, showing that, and we got a little indication that the bond yield has stopped declining. So it's going to be interesting what happens with this interest rate, with the global demand for the dollar, and it's going to be interesting to see if these interest rates keep declining.
Mhm.
That's going to be rough. I'm in that camp that I wouldn't be surprised if they raised it
Right.
just because of the demand. That the market can support it. That'll be disastrous though for the home sales and like auto market. It will absolutely be the final straw. Okay, if that interest rate starts to go up, because we think those sales are hurting now. You wait until the interest rate moves up and it gets even harder to qualify for those mortgages. But on the other hand, the price of the house and the car is coming down. So, it might the sale price might fall faster, will likely fall faster than the interest rate will rise if it rises.
All right. This next one is from the Atlantic.com. The next recession will destroy millennials. Millennials are already in debt without savings. After the next downturn, they'll be in even bigger trouble. I think Dollar has talked about this in the past. The trade war is dragging on. The yield curve is inverting. Investors are fleeing to safety. Global growth is slowing. The stock market is dipping. The millennials are screwed. Recessions are never good for anyone. A sputtering economy means miserable financial, emotional, and physical health consequences for everyone from infants to retirees. But the next one, if it happens, when it starts happening, stands to hit this much maligned generation particularly hard. For adults between the ages of 22 and 38, after all, the last recession never really ended. Millennials got bodied in the downturn, have struggled in the recovery, and are now left more vulnerable than other older age cohorts. As they pitch toward the middle age, they are failing to make it to the middle class and are likely to be the first generation in modern economic history to end up worse off than their parents. The next downturn might make sure of it, stalling their careers and sucking away their wages right as millennials enter the prime earning years. It was the last downturn, the once a century Great Recession, that set them on this dartering economic course. The millennials graduated into the worst job market in 80 years. That did not just mean a few years ago, a few years of high unemployment, or a couple years living in their parents' basements. It meant a full decade of lost wages. The generation unlucky enough to enter the labor market in a recession suffers significant earnings losses that take years and years to rebound, studies show. Something that hard data now backed up. As of 2014, millennial men were earning no more than Generation X men were when they were in the same age, and 10% less than the baby boomers. Despite the earning, uh, despite the economy being far bigger and the country far richer, millennial women were earning less than Generation X women. So much for inequality. Kids of the 1980s and 1990s have had a few huge financially catastrophic demand on their meager post-recession earnings too. $1 trillion of educational debt. About a quarter of Generation Xers who went to college took out loans to do so, compared with half of millennials. And millennials ended up taking out double the amount of Generation Xers did. No wonder, given the given that the cost of tuition has gone up more than 100% since 2001, even after accounting for inflation. The toxic combination of lower earnings and higher student loan balances combined with the tight credit in the recovery years has led to millennials getting shut out of the housing market and thus losing a seminal way to build wealth. The, genera- the generation's home ownership is a full 8 percentage points lower than that of the Generation X's or the baby boomers when they were the same age. The median age of home buyers has risen all the way up to 46, the oldest it has been since the National Association of Realtors started keeping records 4 decades ago. As a result, millennials have not benefited from the dramatic rebound in housing prices that has occurred since the financial collapse and the foreclosure crisis. Millennials have also been forced to shell out hundreds of billions of dollars in rent as housing costs have skyrocketed in many urban areas. This represents a large generational transfer of wealth from the young to the old. Boomers own the houses and bar municipalities from building more of them, thus benefiting from rising prices and soaking up endless rent checks forked over by younger and poorer families. Cost pressures have also made it difficult or impossible for millennials to save or invest. The share of Americans under the age of 35 who own stocks has meandered down from 55% in 2001 to 37% in 2018, in part because employers are less likely to offer retirement savings plans, and in part because millennials have nothing left over at the end of the month to put away. Virtually all members of the cohort are not saving adequately, experts warn, and 2/3 of millennials have zero retirement savings. This means that millennials have been benefited. This means that millennials have benefited not a bit from the decade-long boom in stock prices, as their parents and grandparents have. Millennials are worth less on paper than members of older generations are, and are worth less on paper than members of older generations were at the same point in their lives. The net worth of your average millennial household is 40% lower than Gen X households in 2001 and 20% lower than for baby boomers households at the end of the 1980s. Could the millennials make up this lost ground? Perhaps if wage growth suddenly and dramatically accelerates, urban cores start to build millions of new homes, and Congress announces a student loan debt jubilee, but financial experts consider it unlikely. Millennials missed out on the big asset boom that occurred between 2010 and the present, and appreciation is unlikely to be as rapid in the near future as it was during the recent period, argue economists at the Federal Reserve. With the baby boomers occupying most of the top jobs and much of the housing, millennials are doing less well than their parents, concluded Credit Suisse. We expect only a minority of high achievers and those in high demand sectors such as technology or finance to effectively overcome the millennial disadvantage. The next recession, this year, next year, whenever it comes, will likely make that millennial disadvantage even worse. Already, millennials have put off saving and buying homes as well as getting married and having babies because of their crummy jobs and weighty student loans. A downturn that leads to higher unemployment and lower wages will force millennials to wait even longer to start accumulating wealth, making it harder for them to accumulate any wealth at all. Their trajectory, already terrible, might get even worse. And millennials suffering won't just hurt millennials. There is accumulating evidence that the economy is more uh, sclerotic and slower growing than it might be if millennials were able to buy homes, have families, start businesses, and spend like other generations. If the young were not existing just to pump up asset values of the old. Which reminds me, there's one generation that might fare even worse than millennials, Generation Z, Zennials. This is they don't add race to the conversation, but if you factor in race, Black millennials are so they're so screwed at this point. It's unbelievable that nobody in the manosphere, nobody anywhere is talking about this, other than maybe Dr. Claude Anderson and Boyce Watkins. I don't see anybody talking about this. I mean, you talked about this, all Will, many times on many different live streams that we had. That the next recession is going to be catastrophic, and that nobody alive has ever seen anything about as to the likes of what we're going to see.
Right. Now, well, here's the bright side. Yeah, it's going to be bad,
Hmm.
but it depends on how you look at things. It's like, yeah, it's going to be really really bad,
Hmm.
but for the it's also going to be especially bad for young baby boomers and older Gen Xers, people approaching retirement age, because there's a lot of people thinking that they're going to retire, and this downturn is going to put them in a situation where they're going to have to work until they die.
Hmm.
It's just going to just completely destroy their retirement account, and they're not going to have the time or the youthfulness to be able to recover. So that's the part I think is more of it's a greater, they're in greater danger than the millennials and zennials to me,
Hmm.
because what the millennials and zennials have in their favor is time. They're young, they can survive it. Um, this is a time for them to start educating themselves about financial matters, like how to read how to read a chart, stock chart, because a little bit of money can go a long way in investing when this devastation comes. The people with money, money and knowledge, and I don't mean people who are rich. I mean people who have some disposable income, whether it's extra $100, a few $1,000 to invest. I mean, it should be everybody's goal. If you don't have $10,000 that you can invest, you should be trying to get that. Get a side hustle, do what you can do, and educate yourself, because when the time is right, someone is in their 20s, 30, or early 30s, if they have that money, um, things grow at a ridiculously fast rate. We're talking about, remember, I remember when Apple computer was under $2.
Yep.
Okay, so you're gonna have deals like that. Big name companies are gonna be penny stocks,
Hmm.
and it'll grow back up to, from less than $2 to up to $50. We're talking about a decade. A decade sounds like a long time, but it's not. If you're in your 30s now, This the longest downturn we've had. I don't think none has gone 3 years. So it happens. It's like good news, bad news. It happens real fast. It happens real fast. So and so the dam is going to be real bad, but it's going to happen real fast. And at the end of it, the people who have some knowledge and some disposable income to be able to invest, they're going to be at the ground floor of the greatest investment opportunity of the last 100 years. So
Yes.
if you're young and knowledgeable, you get a chance to participate in it. The foreclosure market is going to be ridiculous. There's going to be so many daggone homes in foreclosures. All these flipping videos, I don't think this is the time to flip, but you should be getting the knowledge because, again, this whole downturn from peak to trough is likely to take less than 3 years. So that's enough time for you to get really, really good and reading stocks and trading stocks or learning about flipping or any other thing you want to learn. You want to take that course in IT. That's the most positive constructive thing that you can do in that downturn. Learn a new skill and always, of course, in capitalism, learn about investing, and then you'll come out. You'll be poised to be rich because you're going to be investing in a housing market and a stock market with nowhere to go but up, and time will be on your side. So this is it's going to turn out to be like the best possible situation for millennials and zennials that survive it.
Hey, Super Triz, welcome to the panel. And do you have any input on this? What we're talking about here?
Thanks for having me. Respect to you both, Mike V and Dollar Will. I think
Sir.
Dollar Will hit the nail right on the head. I mean, if anything, right? So some of us may not be necessarily adversely affected by the economic downturn, but when we look at an inability to capitalize on the eventuality of a return to baseline, then we're doing ourselves a disadvantage by not being prepared, both mentally, intellectually, for, as Dollar Will illuminated, having the knowledge base to be able to capitalize, and then number two, having the actual hard capital. I work with people, all my coworkers, they're making six figures and they have no money in the savings account. And I don't understand how this is possible. All the money that they're making, they don't have any money saved. They're saddled with debt. They have student loan debt, credit card debt. They have car loan debt. And if anything happens, right, as far as the economic downturn, right, I think from a stability standpoint, they have job security, so that's not really a concern for them. But when that market goes back up, as Dollar Will was talking about, they're not going to be in any position to take advantage of it. And it's sad, especially when they have the possibility to have so much disposable income. But no, they want to have fun now. They want to go on trips every year. They want to go to Europe. They want to do all this stuff, right? But haven't put aside anything for savings. And all it takes is a little bit of sacrifice. Like, if they just took like I was trying to explain to one of the guys that I work with, I was like, listen, this is how you can make some money. What you have to do is just every other week make that your double down week. So you have an opportunity to work extra shifts, double down on this week, and then your next week you just work your full time. The next week after that you double down again. You do that for 3 months. Now you have a savings. Now you got 10,000, maybe 15,000 in the bank just off of doing that. But they don't want to make that sacrifice now. So really and truly, that honestly, the rest of us that have prepared for this eventuality, that's going to be better opportunities for us. So you have to just ask yourself, on what side of the continuum do you want to be on? Do you want to be the one that's going to sit on the sidelines, or do you want to be the one that's going to be taking advantage of these opportunities? Because really and truly, as bad as it sounds, this quote unquote recession, this is an opportunity of a lifetime. Mm-hmm. Because some generations didn't really get a chance to take advantage of that, but now we actually have a chance to take advantage of it. So when that market goes back up, real estate goes back up, we can position not only ourselves, but our lineage for generations to come.
Well, you know, and that's a good point that you brought up, Super Triz. You know, one of the things that we've noticed, especially with Lionel doing these crypto hangouts, is that millennials are more willing to get into crypto investing than any other demographic, your Gen X's and your baby boomers, mostly because they're a lot more risky. They're more willing to take risk financially. So this is the new wave of culture with the way the market is going, and you got to start thinking about these alternative measures. Super Triz mentioned ways of saving, but what happens when you need to pick up that third income? Uber, Lyft, Craigslist, you know, offer up, flipping things on Craigslist, you know, Jordans and Huaraches and all types of Bally's and Gucci flip-flops and stuff like that. You may have to start doing that type of stuff. You may have to offer washing people's scrubs and stuff at the hospital, man, and putting creases in their scrubs. Starting to see that now.
We started to see people offering up that box, but that's another.
Onlyfans.com /
Yeah, but I think what Super Triz said is right on. That's the easy thing to do is if you are working, you know, work that overtime day, take that money out, that, you know, that goes into your savings, you know, to be able to invest, but be learning at the same time. You know, that holiday comes around and you work a type of job where you're allowed to, you know, work a holiday for extra pay, you know, go for it. You know, you'd be surprised how it can build up, you know. I remember, you know, when I the last shop I was working at, I you know had a high paying job for about 25 years. Every time I got a raise, I never knew what it felt like to have the money that I made, because I was contributing like, I don't know, 15% of my income to retirement account. So I never got a chance to know what it felt like to make the six figures I was making, because I never bought it home. I put it in the retirement account. So when you get a raise, put it in the account. Don't even get used to making the money. You know, just go ahead and kick it in there.
Yeah, if you look at tiny house sales, and we've been meaning to cover this. If you look at tiny house sales, I think over 2/3 of those sales are actually women buying those buying tiny houses. They're the the biggest demographic. So especially millennials, they're looking at this. I think Super Triz, I talked about this before, but you're seeing millennials living out of vans. You know, they just drive around, just living out of a van. That's just the way it is. And they're looking at all of this, and it's I guess women are more receptive to downturn than men are, right? I guess men may look at it differently.
Well,
yeah. Go ahead, Super Triz.
Well, women are able to do like a lot of most of my coworkers are females, obviously, but out of my female coworkers, most of them have roommate arrangements. Either they're living with a significant other or they're living with female roommates.
Yep.
And part of the thing is that, as a woman having a roommate doesn't affect her access to the opposite sex. Whereas a man having a roommate, women look at that as a negative, because the first thing women always ask you, well, who you stay with? And so a lot of men are adverse, myself included, but for other reasons, a lot of men are averse to living with roommates, which really is an effective way to slash your expenditures. Because when you look at trying to basically have money, trying to have money to save, you either have to cut your expenses or increase your revenue.
Yep.
That's the only two ways. And so, having a roommate effectively slashes your monthly expenditures because you're able to split the bills. But a lot of men are reluctant to do that because, again, that affects your ability to interact with the opposite sex, because women look at that as a negative, whereas men don't look at that as a negative necessarily for women. And so women are not quite as averse to doing it.
Yeah, they'll beat it up in front of their roommate, so it doesn't really matter. But the point that I want to make here is that I don't hear anybody in the black manosphere talking about this. People are talking about passport gate, and that's fine, but this is a serious issue, because if you look at the numbers, and we've covered the numbers before, I think maybe about a month or so ago, we were talking about the impact of economic downturn and how it affects black people. If you think about the annual income per capita, and you look at black people are always behind their other two demographics of Asians and white, they're going to be the first ones to get hit because they don't have any economic resiliency. And because they lack economic resiliency, you'll see more examples of failure and more immediate in predominantly black areas. And you'll probably see a lot more people moving back home with mom or grandma or whoever it is, wherever relative that you can move in with. But even those opportunities are starting to be a lot more slim now too, because as the older generation pass on and they don't pass anything on in their passing, that last generation or becomes left out as well. So they're not building enough housing, at least on the East Coast. They're not building housing quick enough to accommodate all of these newly graduated millennials coming out of college, and that's why they're roommating up, they're shacking it up and stuff like that. And that's why you see tiny houses are on the move right now. If you have carpentry skills and you can build a tiny house and you have the plot of land allocated from the government with the zoning laws in place, you could make a considerable amount of income offering tiny houses to those demographics. I don't see how a tiny house is any different than living with a roommate. We got 50 people watching, only 25 likes. Hit the like button if you're not going to participate in the chat. All right, let me get to this next article. This one is from CNBC.com. Why one career for life is a thing of the past. I'm gonna read this whole thing, but getting a college degree may no longer be significant for people's careers, according to an expert in the education sector. Speaking to CNBC Street Signs Europe on Monday, John Fallon, CEO of education company Pearson, said shifting career expectations and longer life expectancies were reducing the importance of receiving a college education. Think about this. If you're an 18-year-old leaving high school this year, there's more than 50% chance that you will live to be over 100, he said. That means you're going to be working well into your 70s or 80s. And though that time you're likely to have a 5 or 6 different careers. So this idea that you want to do what you want to do in high school, going on to university between the ages of 20 to 22, is going to define you for life, is no longer going to exist, because you're going to have to relearn, reskill, and retrain throughout your working life. Pearson, the world's largest education publisher, creates educational content and assessment assessments and operate in 70 countries. The company announced last month that all new releases of its 1,500 titles in the US would be digital first. Fallon told CNBC that attitudes towards education and careers were being changed by the fact that younger generations had grown up in a digital first world. They don't want to spend a fortune on higher education only to find it's not relevant to their needs in the working world, he said. The reality is that we're always going to be learning throughout our lives. Figures suggest that young people are increasingly considering alternative paths to higher education. The National Student Clearinghouse Research Center's statistics show that overall post-secondary education enrollments in the US saw a year-over-year decrease of 1.7% in spring 2019. The data also showed that enrollments at four-year public and private institutions declined from the previous year. Meanwhile, a poll of nearly 3,000 British school pupils published this month found 20% of young people up to the age of 16 did not think it was important to go to university. Market research firm Ipsos Mori also found that young people felt knowing the right people was more important than getting a degree. However, Fallon said universities could make themselves more relevant by publicizing the fact that they were training students in important life skills that could not be automated. We're monitoring the skills that are least disruptable by technology and the hardest for machines to automate or mimic, he told CNBC. Those skills are learning how to learn fluency of ideas, the ability to be creative and come up with lots of different things, the ability to persuade somebody of a different point of view, the ability to teach somebody how to do something, the ability to lead, the ability to emphasize, to care for somebody. Fallon said these are uniquely human skills and argue that universities were the institutions that did the best job of teaching them. Universities just don't want all just don't always do a very good job of explaining to society that that's what they do or apply those skills and those attributes in a way that is directly relevant to work as it could be, he explained. That has to change, and I think that will change. Although Fallon predicted a college education would become less important in the future, statistics suggest that going to university still makes financial sense. According to the data published by the US Bureau of Labor Statistics in February, workers with at least a bachelor's degree earn more than the national median weekly earnings, while people who had professional and doctoral degrees earn more than triple the income of those with less than a high school diploma. Meanwhile, a 2018 report by the British Government Department for Education and the Institute of Fiscal Studies found that men in the UK receive a 6% income boost if they graduated from university, while women earn 28% more if they had a degree. I think there's something to be said about finding that balance. And we talk about edx.org a lot because you can get a decent education for cheap off of there, if not for free. Also, picking up these boot camps that we've talked about. Going to a boot camp can actually be beneficial for you because they're meant for career changers. So going to a boot camp, for a month or 90 days or whatever it is actually going to be beneficial.
And also millennials and zennials, especially zennials.
Super Triz, your mic is breaking up, Super Triz. You might have to log off and log back on.
Oh, I wasn't saying anything.
Oh, okay. Wow. So it sounded like he was talking. Okay.
Yeah.
What I was saying is the zennials, they also have the benefit of this movement to make college free, or at least the community college level free. So that's going to help them as well. And so this, the degree thing, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Historically, New technologies would come on the scene. First, early entrants into that field didn't necessarily need a degree. As the pool of laborers increase, then the degree requirement finds its way onto the job announcement. It's mostly used as a filter. So I think it's going to happen. It could happen again that a lot of these jobs that are springing up that don't require a degree, and at some point when the supply of workers gets great enough, they have to find some way to repel applicants, and so the degree requirement historically has been one of those ways.
Go ahead,
So
Super
it
Troopers.
might happen again.
I think part of the problem is that people get a degree, then they look for a job, as opposed to looking for a job first, finding out what the requirements are for that job that they want, and then pursuing whatever educational requirements is a prerequisite for that job. And I think that will save people a lot of time. I was just watching a stream again. This is why I encourage people from within the Black sector of YouTube to look at presentations from other groups, because there's an individual in there who talked about engineering and how different forms of engineering, depending on what actual subset of engineering that you go into, you might find it difficult to find a job as an engineer. And so you have to be careful and kind of look at what the job prospects are, what the demand is, and then look at what the educational requirements, and then make a decision accordingly as far as if and where you go to school. That's number one. Number two, look at some what you would call hacks as far as your education is concerned. Like some jobs offer education or tuition assistance or reimbursement. So look into that. Military obviously will either reimburse you, or you can go to the military and then afterwards use the GI Bill, and then have your funds for college that way. So there's different ways that you can go to school and not be saddled with student loan debt. I don't have any student loan debt whatsoever at all. I have, my associate's degree was paid for by the military. My bachelor's degree was paid for by my job. So, and then the school that I went to, one class I had to pay for one class out of pocket because I tried to work around taking some classes. That one class I took was $2,000. Now imagine if I had to pay for that school out of pocket if one class was $1,995. So we have to kind of look at things like from a business standpoint and say, okay, what makes sense? What's a good investment? So if I want to leverage the least amount of capital for the greatest amount of return. So if I can get away with only paying a fraction or maybe even nothing for my education, or if I look at my job and I say, okay, even though my job will pay for my education and I won't have to pay anything out of pocket. When you look at the actual salary of that particular job, if that salary is not anything significant versus the amount of time you spend in school, then maybe you should reconsider what you're actually majoring in, or what you're actually pursuing as far as a career is concerned.
Yeah, I think one of the issues is that people don't know what they want to do, so they jump into whatever is available from an academic standpoint. And what happens here is, somebody, goes to school for computer science and they really don't have a major interest in computer science, but they take it anyways. And because they're not enthusiastic about it, they don't really put a whole lot of effort into it. They got by with a passing grade, but they really did not excel at it. And if you don't excel in your classes, then what happens here? The internships don't get offered up to you, because internships are only offered up to those who do well in their studies. And because of that, you may find yourself, you graduated, but you don't have too many job prospects.
So, well, that's why it's so important to have people from within your community that can serve as models, perhaps even mentors. Because when I was younger, I worked with a scientist. He went to my church, and he was a scientist at University of California, Riverside. And so I did a summer type program where I worked with him in the lab, and he was basically doing genome sequencing for he was a botanist, and he was doing genome sequencing. And so, I quickly found that, being a scientist, because, I thought, yeah, I want to be a scientist because I like science class. But then when you actually see what scientists do as a job, is very monotonous. You do a repetitive thing over and over again because you have to rule out certain variables. So things are repetitious. So if that's not what you're into, well, first of all, you have to know if you're going to be into it or not by experiencing it, or at least being able to have a conversation with somebody who does it consistently, right? And so that's the reason why it's important to have, at least be around people who have some semblance of success, and who work in professional fields, so you kind of know what to go into.
Right, and that's a good point, and that's why I always tell guys when they come on here, from a mentorship standpoint, you might want to look at vocational schooling. You don't always have to go to college. Trade school is just fine, man. A 9-month certificate program that can get you basic electricity, HVAC, or refrigeration, diesel mechanic, all that stuff there's a market for everybody. And I think that sometimes people are putting the battery in their back and they tell them, yeah, you got to go to college, but at the same time, that may not be their best choice. A certificate program, vocational program is still a viable option, and it should be there. It should be a priority for them.
Yeah, I think everyone should get to know the government's website, bls.gov. I haven't been to the site in a while, but Mike, I think one day we should just have a show dedicated to just exploring that site, because they have a wealth of data that the federal government does, or at least they used to. The last time I was on the site, I've been to it many times through the years. They provide forecasts. I mean, who is in a better position to know than the federal government the growth rate of a particular industry or job? So
The World Economic Forum would. The World Economic Forum is very, very good at predicting emerging economies and so on and so forth, and kind of they have a whole entire packet that is developed every year just for that purpose. We went over that back in April or May or something to that effect. World Economic Forum of 2019, and we did it last year too for 2018. So we've covered those areas.
Yeah, but we need to get to know our federal government site as well, because the information there is tailored to us in particular. So they say it right there. They tell you what levels of education that's needed. They make they tell you what percentage of what the median income is. They lay it all. They tell you what the growth rate is in the next few years, whether it's growing up or down, and by what percentage amount. You can, it's very detailed information, So I agree with all that to say Super Triz is right. I think it's criminal that we are allowed to graduate high school and without a serious meeting with the counselor. I mean, a serious one, not where you go and show your face and she signs the paper that you came to see her. I mean, a real one where everybody, there's this push by the counselors in high school to get people in college, but there isn't an equal push to make sure that parents and the student is informed of the economics of their choice. Okay, how much that education is going to cost, how much that job pays, what's the hiring trend for that, the growth rate for that industry. No one should be allowed to go to college without getting that information. No college should be allowed to take your money without making sure that you know that information. And that's a very simple policy that a president could just put that in place, but we were offered up, we were allowed to be exploited. Okay, the system just serves people up to go to these universities, selling you on a dream and and they had all the information to help you to allow you, to force you to make an informed choice. But the system was in favor of the business entities making money and not the citizens being protected. But
Well,
that's
two,
that.
two things, man. So in NISB, we don't even, we have the PCI, so the pre-college initiative. So we work with the kids from 5, 6 years old, 8 years old, all the way up until they graduate from high school. So they're always on some form of STEM track, to keep them in the straight and narrow all the way up until they reach college and so on and so forth. But the number two thing here is, why are community colleges charging anything to the residents of that area? The whole purpose of a community college is supposed to be a public institution that's available to the taxpayers of that area. What we're seeing now is that they're charging these people while taking the tax dollars to actually fund the operation. They're double dipping for the most part, and they should not be doing that. They should actually be taking the task for that, because those are public tax dollars that are actually paying for it.
Well, a couple of things. I agree that community college is, the purpose is to serve the community, but unfortunately, I think that if community college was free, it would be even more people wasting time. Like even when I went to community college, people would get their student loans and they'll go in class and they'll just waste time. Not student loans, but the
Pell Grant.
FAFSA, the aid, financial aid, whatever, and they'll just completely waste time in class, not take the classes seriously. It was almost like they were in the 13th grade, like it was an extension of high school, and it just I think people don't value things they don't have to pay for. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't value things they don't have to pay for.
Well, those are the people who went for remedial classes. But if you up the interest requirement to something like you have to have a 79% to get in or 80% to get in, that weeds out a lot of people.
Well, I think they do something similar in Germany, like where
Turkey does the same thing.
Yeah, it's like you can't go to a certain university. You have to go to like a trade school or maybe even like some type of vocational education, as opposed to going to a university, unless you're willing to pay for it out of your own pocket, because they basically they start tracking you when you're in high school, and they actually have people that talk to you and determine what your options are as far as higher learning is concerned. So I think that's an issue as well. But also, I think it's important that parents be involved, because at one point in time, I thought that I wanted to go into computers. And my father, obviously, he knew me better than I knew myself at that time. And so he said, no, you need to go into healthcare because, you're more science oriented than you are computer. Just because you like to play video games doesn't mean that you're a computer guy. And so, of course, I just followed I followed the tutelage of my father. And so I think that's important to have parents that are involved, through every step of that child's education, and kind of being tuned to what that child's strengths and weaknesses are, as my parents were. And so, a lot of times people in such a dire economic state that they're so involved with their own occupation, they can't be involved with their child's scholastic endeavors, because they're at work and their children are latchkey kids. And I understand that you have to put food on the table, but you also have to make time for that child, because the especially if they're in public school. We know that the public schools are not going to really educate. They're going to kind of leave the child to their own devices, and it's kind of more like a sink or swim.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with Super Triz. I will also add to what Dollar Will said about BLS. There's another website you can check, ONET online. That's a great place to get an idea what are the. It actually shows you the trends for the current careers that are going to be projected to have pretty good growth over the next 10 to 20 years. So it's a good place to go for resources as well if you're looking for careers. And for the most part, we talked about, you and I have talked about this before, Mike, about community college. Unfortunately, as much as it should be free, I I don't think it's a great idea because for exactly the reason Super Triz said, and you and I have talked about this before on a few different occasions where I have personally seen it with students at community colleges. They get the Pell grants and whatever, and they don't show up for class or whatever. Just get the free money and you never see them again. So yeah, I think that's important. And I also will add too that I think it's even more important for parents to be involved in a child's education. Again, we know that public school systems will just pass a child. So
Yep.
if a child doesn't know exactly what they want to do by the time they are of college age, I do look at the parents because it is the parents' responsibility to foster those child's interests. You're there; they are supposed to be putting these kids into camps or whatever the case may be, for the summer or even throughout the school year. I can tell you now, a number of medical schools have programs right now for middle school kids that actually are pipeline programs that feed middle schoolers, follow them throughout their middle school into high school, into their college years, and eventually matriculate into medical school. And currently, right now, I am working with a physician who both him and I are trying to put together a grant that is being funded possibly through the AAMC to as a pipeline program for aspiring Black physicians that they might not have the ability to get mentors, physician mentors, when they're in high school and going into their college years.
Good points. Good points.
I see that
All right.
Hurricane Dorian has been upgraded to Category 4. Y'all be careful in Florida. Check on your family in Florida.
Yeah. Next article is from CNBC.com. Trump on U.S.-China trade war. I could declare a national emergency. President Donald Trump said Sunday he could declare the escalating U.S.-China trade war as a national emergency if he wanted to. In many ways, this is an emergency. Trump said at the G7 leaders meeting of the ongoing trade battle between the world's top two economies. I could declare a national emergency. I think when they steal and take out in intellectual property theft anywhere from $300 billion to $500 billion a year, and when we have a total loss of almost $1 trillion a year from many years, Trump said, adding that he had no plan right now to call for a national emergency. Actually, we are getting along very well with China right now. We are talking. I think they want to make a deal much more than I do. I'm getting a lot of money in tariffs. It's coming in by the billions. We've never gotten 10 cents from China, so we'll see what happens. Trump's comments come as he met with Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson, kicking off a group of 7 meetings in the French seaside town of Biarritz, clouding the G7 gathering, which represents the world's major industrial economies, are the tit-for-tat tariffs between Washington and Beijing. On Friday, Trump said he would raise existing duties on $250 billion in Chinese products to 30% from 25% on October 1st. What's more, tariffs on another $300 billion of Chinese goods, which start to take effect on September 1st, will now be 15% instead of 10%. When Trump was asked on Sunday if he had second thoughts about Friday's move to escalate the trade war with China, he said, "Yep," adding, "I have second thoughts about everything." Hours later, the White House issued a statement saying that Trump meant to say that he wished he had raised tariffs on Beijing even higher. His answer has been greatly misinterpreted. President Trump responded in the affirmative because he regrets not raising the tariffs higher, White House spokeswoman Stephanie Grissom wrote in a statement. During the bilateral with Johnson, Trump dismissed concerns that the leaders at the G7 and other U.S. allies would pressure him in ending the trade war with China. I think they respect the trade war. It has to happen. China has been, well, I can only speak for the United States. I can't say for what they are doing to the UK and other places, but from the standpoint of the United States, what they've done is outrageous that presidents and administrations allow them to get away with taking hundreds of billions of dollars out every year and putting it into China. Trump said our country is doing well, very well, or really well. We had horrible trade deals, and I'm straightening them out. The biggest one by far is China. He added. Well, if he wants to, if he wants to declare that on an emergency, I guess he may have some. He may have some justification there, but it's not going to help because the damage has already been done for the most part. At least to the United States, the damage has been done. China can afford the flexibility to shift their operations to other countries and discontinue as if nothing really happened. All right, this next one is from fastcompany.com. We need to define America's new middle class. When my parents immigrated to the US from Hungary in the late 1950s and 1960s, they both landed in the Midwest, the heartbeat of America, the hub of American manufacturing, and the foundation of the American dream. In the past 60 years, that heartbeat has changed as we've moved squarely into the fourth industrial revolution. Today, the United States has the largest wealth gap since before the Great Depression. That should that should be the focus of the 2020 presidential election. How will the candidates restore America's once thriving middle class in the age of the Industry 4.0? Why we need to redefine middle class America. The year 2015 was the first on record that middle income families no longer made up the majority in America. Since 1971, the share of Americans in the middle class has fallen by 9 points, and the share of income in the middle class has fallen by 19 points. While the economic implications of this finding vary, one thing remains certain: in the US, middle class stands for the American dream, and the majority of the middle class Americans live in the Rust Belt. Between 2000 and 2010, the manufacturing employment in the six Great Lakes states dropped by 35% and eliminated 1.6 million jobs, a more dramatic decline than during the Great Depression. During those same 10 years, median household incomes fell more in five of the six Great Lakes states than in the entire US more recently. General Motors provided perhaps the most significant warnings to date when they stated their need to embrace technology to survive, a business imperative that would see thousands of workers losing their jobs. While the US has seen some of the largest gains in manufacturing jobs in the past 2 years, that only tells part of the story. Manufacturing jobs constitute a smaller share of the US jobs, down from 25% in 1970 to 8.5% today. Expenses such as healthcare and retirement chip away at wages for the manufacturing jobs that remain. For every dollar increase in manufacturing wages since 1970, workers pay $22.33 for education, $1.85 for housing, and $1.42 for out-of-pocket healthcare costs, nullifying any wage growth. As expenses rise and advanced technologies are embraced, we need to redefine middle class America to ensure everyone benefits equitably from the brave new world we create. Um, I don't even know how we can even have that conversation about black people if we're just going to narrow it down to that. But my position is this: we don't have a middle class anymore. I mean, I think we should forget about that. I think that we should we should be focused on just having a working class, and that should just be the more realistic aspect of being in this country. You have poor, you have working class, and then you have, that top 10, top 20%. That should be the way that it's looked at. There's nothing middle about being 1 or 2 paychecks away from from homelessness and not having a savings account. I don't see the logic in that.
Well, I think that when the quote unquote middle class constituency has dwindled to the numbers that it has, they're no longer a collective power, and that's where the actual economic resiliency comes from, in the fact that individuals have somebody. We have a collective power where we can argue for certain things, but like, as you said, when you're a mere paycheck away, it's essentially whether or not you're at the mercy of others. Like you really don't dictate your own outcomes, and that's what it boils down to. Whether you are you are your outcomes dictated by someone else? Are you at the mercy of someone else, or do you determine fates of others? And you're either on one side of that spectrum or another. There are a couple of people who operate outside of that continuum, who, for whatever reason, have completely removed themselves from society, where maybe they live off the land, and that's a small percentage of the population. Most people are reliant on society. They somehow have to benefit from society and its inherent infrastructure to survive. So from that perspective, and there is no middle class, and I don't see a middle class moving forward. Unless there's some type of dramatic, like, world war, where there's a re-stratification, of society, and the eventuality is that, society will re-stratify at some point in time. If the middle class reemerges, at some point, the dust will settle, and then there will be the haves and have-nots once again. I mean, history has shown us this repeatedly. And so, again, take advantage of the opportunities to change your socioeconomic strata. If you don't have any money saved up, this is definitely the time. I mean, you're already behind the curve, but it's better late than never. Try to put aside some money to take advantage of whatever comes up next, as far as the economic instability is concerned.
Anybody else? Dr. Dollar Will, Dr. Phoenix?
I mean, again, I mean, I would agree. I don't think there is a middle class going forward. In fact, people are still reeling from the recession of 2008. This is part of the reason why you've seen such massive growth in many different sectors like healthcare, because you have a number of folks who were wiped out in the '08 recession, and they stayed in the workforce longer than they probably wanted to. And so now many of these folks are on the verge of retirement. I was reading an article last night that was discussing, basically, you have about, I think it was somewhere around a third of all physicians are 55 and older, and which means that within the next decade or so, they will be retiring. Nurses, for example, you have most nurses are 55 and older. So, I mean, these are prime areas for opportunities for brothers, for Black folks in general. And again, I would agree with Super Triz when he said, now is the time to take advantage of your ability to make money and save money and stow it away. We already know there's another recession on the horizon. And so, it's going to be a prime opportunity for those who have it to make investments and come out on the good side on the other end.
Jay Charles, what's going on, fam?
Peace, brother. Peace, brothers. How y'all doing tonight?
I'm chilling, man. Chilling. You?
I'm great, brother.
All right, awesome, awesome. So, okay, my thoughts on this is, all right. So the middle class has been obliterated. It's gone now. I guess people are so um, holding on to this whole American dream bullshit. I guess what's taught to us, just throughout the years. So, but I think this is a good thing, right? Especially for our people, because I think our lifeline, right? What we're blessed with is the ability to go into new markets, such as especially in technology. This is wide open right now. I've been listening to, reading a lot of articles, listening to other chats, and it's wide open for us to take advantage and to come out of this as a victors. But I think the issue is that people are still holding on to this old American dream, and they don't want to let it go. So my question to you brothers are, do you think this is going to be a motivating factor for our people to kind of like make new moves to instead of just not just saving, but just get to create opposed to just be consumers, right? Do you think this is a great opportunity for them to light a fire under their butt to get things going?
I think that's already happening. Um, I'm seeing people, that I typically would not have seen picking up different sort of work and other aspirations, man. They're doing it right now. So it, it's just a matter of how are they, channeling a lot of that energy and a lot of that, a lot of fiscal responsibility.
Yeah, I mean, we are we're survivors, but the thing is getting us started. We wait till the ninth hour, but that's the thing. When are we gonna?
Procrastination.
Yeah. We will get around to it.
Mhm.
When we smell the smoke, we'll go, oh,
Well,
oh
this is what Dr. Claude has been talked about. Dr. Claude Anderson has been talking about since 20. He says Black people have between now and 2053 to get it right. We've been saying it on here that Black people have between now and 2050. This is the last go around. A lot of people think that we're selling doom and gloom and fear porn and stuff like that. No, this is serious business because these are industries that you have to have a coded set of skills for and enthusiasm for. And if you don't have it, um, you're screwed. No one's going to look out for you at this point because you're too far behind the eight ball to catch up. You see McDonald's, Burger King, Domino's Pizza, um, all going with automated solutions in their restaurants and in the delivery vehicles. Probably in the next 5 years, you'll see those delivery vehicles start pulling up and delivering, orders up to customers. Um, all these areas that Black people work in, as seen. We just deployed in Boston. We just deployed an automated what do you call it? Security vehicle. Just saw that yesterday afternoon. Automated security vehicle. So they're leveraging every sort of piece of technology that Black people usually work, especially Black men working in security. They drive around in these vehicles around the mall and stuff like that, and these sort of jobs that nobody else is willing to take. Those jobs are starting to be automated.
yeah. We have to. I mean, in the sense of America, we have to stop sending conflicting messages. There's this message we get from the time we're a child, young, that you can be anything you want to be. And so then that makes people look at things in terms of what's fun, what do I enjoy? And we don't, like we said earlier in the show, they don't realize there's an economic part of that equation. It might not be viable what you like, what brings you joy. It may not be economically viable, but it's hard to sell that economic viability message after people have been hearing since they were a child all the way to the time they're going to college, that you can be anything you want. So we have to send that economic viability message concurrent with the message you can be whatever you want. But there's consequences,
You're going to need new financial vehicles and services for this new sort of economy.
Right.
So how do you go? How do you
I
go
mean,
about?
we have to let people know that life is not just a one big party. Okay, everybody's not going to be able to do what they like because it's fun. There's some things in life you have to do because it's practical, because it makes sense, and it promotes your survival. And once you get that taken care of, some people will be able to go and do something else, and then a large number of people will grow to love the thing that they're doing. That started out as something practical. They learn that they're pretty good at it, and they may actually find that they love it.
What were you going to say, Super Tris? Or was it Jay Charles?
I'm muted. That wasn't me.
No, I was gonna say, you said something about new, financial vehicles. You said, like, how would we go about doing that?
So when I mention financial vehicles and services, I'm referring to the current and future economic situation for Black people, right? So financial services in the Black community would look like checks, cash, and Western Union. But how do you retain all of those dollars per person? How do you prop up a better an institution that can better serve the people while not robbing them at the same time? Because you have to look out for people's best interests, and while still being a capitalist, right? So you start thinking about healthcare healthcare from like a subscription model, where they're not going to the emergency room racking up a $2,000 bill just because their tonsils hurt or their throat hurts or something like that, for non-emergency needs. We've seen that here in Boston, people showing up to the ER because they got the flu instead of just scheduling an appointment at their local clinic because they don't want to pay. They think they can just go to the emergency room and get seen, and then they just walk out and call it a day. That ambulance ride costs $1,500 now. How do we create vehicles, financial vehicles that are more cost effective so that Black people are not hemorrhaging just off of medical services? How do we create a vehicle for retirement? Because Social Security, I mean, that's one thing, but what happens when you move back in with your parents, your grandmother? How do you create a household financial vehicle that can be passed on from one generation to the next? We haven't really come up with anything like that yet. A lot of Black people die poor. Look at many of your people in the conscious community dying poor. Amos Wilson and the rest of these Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, people having to pay for her funeral, but the very same people who claim to be conscious, won't put up a buck for it. It's just crazy, man. We're not thinking on that level.
Mike, that's got nothing to do with anything.
Oh,
We
really?
got people. You were correct. Just as what Super Triz said earlier, you got six-figure people here that don't have savings accounts. So people dying poor all across the financial spectrum.
I'll agree to disagree on that.
Even with good jobs. Even with good jobs.
I'll agree. I would agree to disagree on that. So.
I mean, there was an article that came out earlier that showed that people it's just weird. You have to read it about a couple of times. It says something about people that make like the lower income, like around the $50,000 level, actually have more money in savings than people who make 100,000. I couldn't believe it. But then you think about the way how the values are skewed. I mean, people at the higher end, they haven't made it now. They got some psychological stuff going on. Okay, chasing status.
Different demographics have different lifestyles.
Right. So I'm just saying that there's, let's not segment one group of the community and just make them the whipping boy. Okay, because it's issues all across the spectrum.
Who did I segment?
Well, you just said the conscious community, right?
No, I used that as an example. I didn't segment them to people. I'm just using that example that there are people who do need the help but have not even gotten it from within their circles. So that's all I'm saying. I'm saying if you have a household with, I think they call it multi-generational living, and there's still no savings in it, then there's something needs to be designed as a financial vehicle for that sort of situation. We haven't really come up with anything for that demographic of people.
Well, I think the problem is that you require people to be selfless, to truly have something for the next generation. The current generation has to be selfless. You have to be willing to sacrifice and forego things that you want to make sure that if you're wanting to have a family, you're wanting to have children, that they will have something that can be passed on to them. So I mean, I think as it pertains to this argument is very much rooted in the fact that unfortunately in Black society, most Black folks are selfish. They're thinking about the here and now, and they don't think 20, 30, 50 years down the road.
Mm-hmm.
So you can say that there's a strong correlation with uh, economics and culture. Then, as you're
Yeah,
you're saying, right?
yeah. There's a struggle culture.
Mm.
Struggle culture is very much real. I got to get mine before you get yours, sort of mentality. Very cutthroat. You know, people running up their kids' uh, um, credit scores and stuff like that, and using their credit to open up, Comcast accounts and Verizon accounts, and kids growing up with no, with poor credit and things like that. Just what a disaster.
Yeah, we need to change that.
Right. So that's why I mentioned financial vehicles and services that should cater to that Black people need to be focused on. I personally I bank Black. I bank at One United, which is a Black bank here in Boston. So that's one of the first things I did. Second thing, pull my money out of white institutions and went straight there. So that did that a few years ago. So
Yeah, my very first bank account when I was a kid, my folks got me a savings account, and it was through a Black bank in Chicago, called Seaway. I'm pretty sure they don't exist anymore. I think they got brought out by Citibank many years ago. But yeah, these are just some of the basics that can start to instill those foundations of proper financial um, responsibility. So
mhm. Yeah, yeah. I'll probably have to we'll probably have to do a whole hangout just on innovative financial ideas and vehicles that Black people can actually benefit from. I do have some ideas I've written down. I just have to find my notepad.
Yeah, I think that'd be great because I just don't get how we, as a Black community as a whole, are able to move. What is that? $1 trillion.
A lot of that is credit.
Oh,
A lot of that's credit. Target store cards and Best Buy cards and stuff
yeah,
like that. Yeah, you have that written in your name. You go out there and you go buy yourself a nice flat screen TV, but then you can't afford to pay it off, so you end up in collection. So
but I think that's a great idea. I think that might create new ideas. If we had a discussion on that, that'd be very effective. That'd be really effective. I like that.
yeah, that's something I like to do in person, man. Like a real panel discussion on stage, man, and just really throw out those ideas, man, because I don't see it happening anywhere else. I mean, I see there's events and stuff being held, but that's for like
Yeah, I don't see it either. I don't see it nowhere.
extracurricular things. Extracurricular things. I just think that when we cover these articles, I don't hear anybody else talking about it. So it's like, well, who else are we going to talk to? All right, let me get to this next article. This one is from NewYorkTimes.com. Farmers' frustration with Trump grows as U.S. escalates China fight. Peppered with complaints from farmers fed up with President Trump's trade war, Sonny Perdue found his masterpiece wearing thin. Oh, sorry. He found his patience wearing thin. Mr. Perdue, the agriculture secretary and the guest of honor at the annual Farm Fest gathering in southern Minnesota this month, tried to break the ice with a joke. This is behind a paywall, so I won't be able to see the whole thing, but I've heard about this before. I've heard about this the other day. There was a some kind of farmers convention. I forget where it was, where they had selling or showing off all these farmers products, kind of like the Detroit Auto Show, and they're pretty upset with Trump. You know, they were not pleased with the trade war because they can't sell their products. You know, or their tractors and their gardening equipment and things of that nature. They can't sell any of that stuff because farmers are going out of business, and China's not playing fair, or I should say, not playing well with the United States. And where their products going to be sold at? Because China was one of the biggest markets.
He's not going to lose that voting base anyway, man. They still support him 100%. I know as far as these farmers, man, they've been taking a hit with these storms. A lot of their land's been destroyed, and especially the soybean market, they took a major hit. So I know they had a bailout. They had like, I forgot how much the total the amount it was, but there was a bailout for these farmers, but it still wasn't enough. Because I think I saw an article, video article on Fox News, and a farmer was saying that it was just enough to repair his tractor and to cover a few bills, but still it didn't make a big difference. So they're hurting right now. Now the question I'll ask myself, my question towards this is like, how much damage is going to make in the future? Because you know, this is their livelihood, right? So like, is this going to eradicate farming as a whole, or are they going
It
to have
won't.
to?
It won't eradicate farming, but what it will do is it will severely injure most of these farmers for the foreseeable future, probably until the next presidential cycle, because China has already found alternative partners. You know, in Brazil, Russia, Africa, they found many goods there. So they really don't need the United States as a primary partner in these areas. They can survive without them, at least for the foreseeable future. They can.
Well, I think that some companies will probably get innovative and actually just start subsidiaries in other countries. That way they can distribute their products, outside the United States. So say, for instance, they want to do business with China, then they'll have a subsidiary perhaps in Africa, or perhaps in, maybe Philippines or Vietnam or something like that. And then basically just move their products there, then rebrand them under the subsidiary, and then sell them to, whatever country they need to sell it to.
Yeah, I don't know how well they'll be able to do that, because a lot of them are already out of business.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, a lot of those farmers went out of business already. And a lot of the trucking industry has gone belly up too. I think MOT came on one night and talked about that a couple months ago. I think back in June or something like that. How many truckers haven't been able to load up their trailers, and they're not making bread. So they're getting out of the business themselves. So this is something that's having a long-term effect on just about all supply chain logistics and the whole entire industry. It'd be hard for some farmers from the Midwest to set up shop in, let's say, Zimbabwe, selling beef back to pork back to China, because those countries already have their own state-run farming state-run farming operations. So it'll be difficult for them to squeeze their way into these countries, because they have protectionist laws that keep them from coming in.
So in other words, they're screwed.
Yeah, American farmers are screwed for the most part. I mean, but black farmers had already been screwed prior to Trump coming into office. I'm surprised that no one's really talked about black farmers not getting their bailout money at all. In fact, black farmers were owed quite a bit of restitution from being screwed over since the Obama administration. I don't know what really came from that. I know maybe one or two black farmers may have been compensated, but the majority have not. I haven't really followed up on it. That's something that we'll probably have to follow up on another day. But some serious business. If black farmers were the canary in the coal mine for the most part, and now you're starting to see it happen all the way across the board.
Yeah, that's sad. That's sad because it's generations, man. This is this is farming goes back some of these families generation. Like, and it's like it's just gone. You know, what are you gonna do now?
Oh, right, because a lot of the operations were designed just for export purposes, not really domestic purposes. China likes a lot of pork. I mean, for obvious reasons. Goes with their rice. So,
Hello.
hey, what's going on, Thai City?
Hey, what's up, Mike? Hey, it's funny you talk about how these farmers they it goes back generations, and they had a trucking company that folded that was started out with a horse and buggy.
Hmm.
That company just folded, and they had two trucking companies go down in one day.
Hmm.
One of the companies had the driver still on the road, and they didn't know what was going on until they gas cars wasn't working.
That's crazy. Now you
Yeah,
can't move your load because you can't fill up the gas. That's unless you pay out of your own pocket. That's crazy.
yeah. And I asked, I'm a diesel tech, so I'm in the field, and I start asking some of the terminal managers, like, how can they do that? And they pretty much said that they go through the bankruptcy without even telling them, nobody, the employees, and they don't even care about the equipment.
What happens to the equipment? Does it get auctioned off or something? I don't get it. You're not just gonna leave your equipment behind.
Well, that's what I was thinking. I said, so what are they doing with these trucks and stuff? And it said like they pretty much don't own it no more. They don't own they don't own
Oh,
the
that
the
makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, that makes sense because it's no longer their responsibility. So there's nothing they
yeah.
can do about it.
Yeah, it's and this is the beginning of it.
I would assume that some collections agency or company comes in and acquires all those assets and then
Yeah, but
repurposes them or auctions them off in order to get collect on their end of the debt.
yeah, but like, it's getting kind of heavy out there. It's
Yeah.
getting heavy.
Yeah, that's crazy. I never really thought about that because I always thought that if you file for bankruptcy, then you're kind of protecting your assets from being repossessed. Um, but I guess in this instance, you probably don't want the assets either because I mean, what are you gonna do with them? I mean, you're already in the negative. So
You know what market right now is booming in trucking? It's EV right now. That's booming right
say
now.
that again.
Electric vehicles, like parts,
Okay.
electric vehicles, that's booming right now. And Walmart is doing well, but yeah, certain markets are taking hits, but uh, pertaining to electric vehicles, that's hot right now,
Mhm.
from what I've seen.
Yeah, I believe Tesla has a electric semi truck too. I know Volvo has an autonomous truck that's already in play out there, and might be somewhere in the Middle East or Northern Africa. They're using on mining sites. These are autonomous earth movers and semis that are actually working around the clock, so they don't have to pay their drivers any labor wages, anything like that. No healthcare, no nothing. The trucks just work as long as the batteries are operating. So
Walmart had one in Walmart's been developing a truck and trailer unit for a while now. I remember seeing prototypes of it. It was had a carbon fiber trailer with a whole solar panel on top, and the motor and stuff was just underneath the front of the trailer. It didn't even look like a cab.
yeah, yeah, because it doesn't need that full body cab, right? There's nothing. There's no driver going up there. There's no real steering mechanism that needs to be up there.
Yeah.
All right, let me get to this next article. This one is from CNBC.com. Never ever use a debit card. Warns fraud expert and ex-con artist. Here's what to do instead. Every year, millions of American consumers, nearly 7% of the population, are victims of scams and frauds. In 2017, the number of fraud victims in the US reached 16.7 million, with $16.8 billion lost. For more than 45 years, I've worked with, advised, and consulted with FBI and hundreds of financial institutions, corporations, and government agencies around the world to help them in their fight against fraud. But my expertise began more than 50 years ago in an unusual way. I was one of the world's most famous con artists. While I am ashamed of what I did as a young man, cheating, stealing, and along the way, deceiving and hurting people, I was grateful for the opportunity to turn myself around. My story, which is depicted in my 1980 memoir, Catch Me If You Can, I remember that, gave me a wider audience to talk about fraud prevention. Sounds like this guy might be a nerdy pookie or something like that. Identity theft is the deliberate use of someone else's identity to get money and credit, obtain employment, steal property, falsify educational and other credentials, access healthcare, and more. The worst case scenario is when an thief drains your bank accounts, takes your property, and sells or trades your sensitive information. In 2017, uh, during the talk I gave at Google, a young man posed a question that I'm often asked. Given all the advancements in computing and technology, isn't it harder for today's criminal to steal your identity than it was back in the 1960s? The answer I told him is no. It's not harder. In fact, it's about 4,000 times easier today than it was then. Identity thieves love technology because it gives them a convenient pathway to the details of your life. Just think about all that's available to you with just a few taps on your keyboard. Credit card reports, bank account numbers, and personal and family details. It's all there. You just have to know how to look for it. And con artists are very good at seeking and finding information. With today's technology, all a thief has to do is go online, give a check printing service your name and account number, have the checks sent to a post office in a post office box, and voila, there goes the contents of your checking account. In the 1960s, when I wrote fake checks under a business or an individual's name and account number, in essence, stealing their identity, I needed a four-color printing press, typesetting equipment, and the technical know-how to run those machines. Now all I need to do is go to a corporate website, grab its logo, and then to a banking website to download its logo. Next, I'd have to make a phone call to the accountant's receivable department of the company whose identity I plan to steal and ask for writing instructions so I can ostensibly wire funds I owe them. And just like that, I know which bank the company uses and its account number at that bank. Then I go online and to access the company's annual report. Lo and behold, now I have a copy of the chairman's or the chairperson's or CEO's signature from the letter at the beginning of the report, which I can put on the checks I create through the miracle of technology. All of it totally authentic to the very last detail, except that the money isn't mine and the check is a fake. Want to avoid identity theft? Never ever use a debit card. I don't own one. I never have, and I never will. I don't recommend them to anyone, not my family, not my friends, not you. As I said at the Google Talk, a debit card is certainly and truly the worst financial tool ever given to American consumer. Why? It's simple. Every time you use one, you put your money in your bank account at risk. Instead, use a credit card. I use one for practically all of my purchases, even when I'm traveling abroad. With credit cards, federal law limits my liability if there's an unauthorized use of my card. When I use a credit card, I'm spending the credit card company's money every day until I pay my bill at the end of the month. Meanwhile, my money is earning interest in a bank account. If there's a large data breach, and you know that there will be, and a criminal does somehow get my credit card number and charges $1 million on it, I'm protected and my credit card company will cancel the card and send a new one within the next couple of days. I won't be responsible for any purchases if the same thing happens and the criminal gets my debit card information. However, I could lose the money in my bank account and have a difficult and lengthy time recovering it. So this is actually really good advice. I've been a victim of debit card theft, so I concur with a lot of his statements. I only use credit cards to do everything that I need to do. I don't even own a debit card personally. I haven't owned one in quite some time. So um, I think this brother is bang on the money. Um,
I concur with that as well. I've never been a victim of debit card theft. Although I use my credit card for, I would say, 99% of my purchases. And the reason why it's only 99% is because my credit card is American Express. I've been meaning to get a Visa card or a MasterCard as well, but because of American Express, there's some retailers that won't accept American Express because American Express, the percentage that they give the retailer. So basically, if I buy something for $100, American Express may only give the retailer $89, and that's
mm,
like the agreement that the retailer has with American Express. And so
mm,
that whatever $11 per $100, American Express gives $1 back to you as cash back points, and then other is like their profit margin. So a lot of retailers don't like American Express for that reason. So if you do use credit cards, make sure that you have um, you probably want to have at least a Visa or a MasterCard, in your portfolio.
mm,
American Express can get tricky for some retailers. So that's what I plan to do next, is get a Visa card, because I do use my credit card for pretty much everything. And especially at the gas pump, that's where a lot of people get taken advantage of, is that, some of these gas pumps and some of these ATM terminals that have the terminal outside of a building, or perhaps
skimmers.
even a terminal inside of a gas station, something like that, because there's like these little RF readers that they're going to fix to the actual slot,
Hmm.
and it looks like it's untampered, and every time you swipe, it takes your information. And
Hmm.
even some retailers, depending on who's the employee, they have these RF readers that they can, like, while you're not looking, if you hand them your card and
Hmm.
they swipe your card themselves, they have the ability to swipe it past their RF reader and take your information. And
Hmm.
so that's like the risk that you run with these. And I think there's some proximity RF readers too. So if your card is on your person, if somebody's in proximity to you, they can pull your RF data from the magnetic stripe. So
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, this is I've heard about these things, but now I'm like, wow, like I never really give it that much thought. I use my debit card, but it's like I never think I have credit cards too. I'm like, I just don't think about that. I didn't know it was that. I'm just always my mindset is always like I'm just watchful of stuff. But the way you guys are explaining it now, I'm just like,
Yeah,
you got
yeah.
me thinking.
Debit cards make sense if you need cash. If you need your own cash out of your own institution, then fine, right? But what happens when you take it outside of your institution's network? Then it becomes vulnerable. So the issue here is that there are so many different point of sale systems that are not compliant with PCI standards. PCI being Payment Cards Industries DSS, digital security standards. And what happens when they're leaking information, your critical information such as your credit card numbers, your PII, personally identifiable information, then you as the consumer, as the cardholder, is screwed. Whereas with the credit card companies, they have so many protection mechanisms in place and so many um, heuristics, IDSs and IPSs in place. IDS stands for intrusion detection, and IPS stands for intrusion protection. Those sort of algorithms that are in place um, kind of prevent a lot of that stuff. Whereas smaller banks don't always have that those sort of mechanisms in place to protect them and protect you, because their job is just to hold your money and that's it. Um, what I personally do is I use my credit card and I just pay it off either before the end of the month or exactly on the due date, um, because I already know where the money's going. So one account to many cards, and it's already auto deducted. So I pay the full balance every month.
Yeah, I was having this conversation about this topic with a family member, and when we beat it all up, and the conclusion to the conversation was the smartest thing is probably, if since we know we like the convenience of a debit card, is to have don't use like separate your checking account from the money that your debit card is attached to. So meaning, like, have a second account where let's say with a small balance of like $500 or something, and that's the account that the debit card is assigned to, and you transfer money from another account into that account on an as needed basis. That way, you're limiting your loss to just that $500 in the that's in the debit account, debit card attachment.
I think the problem with that is that when you have a checking account that doesn't have a direct deposit, they actually charge you a fee. And so I think that's the reason why a lot of people have their debit cards attached, to as their main source of income, because that's where their debit comes into, and that's why they get the free checking account. That's like the deal that a lot of banks have. So I think
I'm saying, can't you have a second account? Open up another. You got your main checking account. You're paying your bills out of that and all that. Then you open another checking account, and that's the one with the debit card.
It depends on each bank. Go ahead.
The second checking account, the bank will charge you a fee to open it. Because I tried to have two separate checking accounts, because I give my mom money. I send my mom money on occasion, and so I was trying to have a separate account, and just that way she has her own card, and that way if I want to give her money, I'd be like, here, just take X amount of money out of the account. And the bank wanted to charge me, I forgot how much money a month, and I'm like, well, forget it. I'll just add my mom on my account, and I'll just and she has to go inside the bank to get the money. She just can't use a debit card. And so so that's like a little tactic that the bank uses, because they want that direct. They want to ensure that money is going into that account, because that's how banks operate, by having access to your capital that you're not using at that time. They can use that capital to and lend out to other people or invest. So that's the. So I think like an easier solution. Well, I won't say it's easier. It's more work, but at least you're not coming out of the pockets. It's just again have a credit card, because every place pretty much, like even like some of these little vendor things, they have these little square readers and all kinds of stuff. So everybody's pretty much on that card wave by now. Even barbershops, they're taking credit cards now. So
they're taking Cash App. Yeah.
Cash App, yep. So Cash App, that's another one. So we're getting to the point now where you really don't have to have the debit card or cash. You don't really have to for certain instances.
Yeah.
Unless you're trying to buy something from the barbershop hustle man. Now, if you're trying to buy a fake Rolex watch from inside the barbershop, you're gonna need cash for that.
Yeah, but they're starting to get hip too, man. They're starting to get hip too. They're getting the cheapest smartphone they can get, and they're getting themselves a Cash App, man. But I think to your point, banks want you to maintain a balance, for one, and two, you have to use the account, because if you don't use the account, then they're going to start to charge you more, because they want you to keep pumping more money into it. They don't want you to just hold on to a debit account and not put more money into it. So it's a difficult and archaic sort of way of balancing money, but or managing money. But I think people are going to slowly start to move away from that type of stuff, and mostly because like your new cars that you buy and stuff like that, you got to use some form of checking account. You're not allowed to use credit. You can't use a credit card to make your payments. I think that's whack. But
no, yeah, they don't let you. It's the same way if you had a mortgage too. They don't let you use credit cards to pay a mortgage neither. So yeah, it's.
You have any input on this, Dr. Phoenix?
Well, because the mortgage companies want all of their money. Again,
Yeah.
those credit cards, they have a deal. American Express has the highest. They charge vendors the highest, notoriously. But like Visa and MasterCard also charge the vendors. So if you pay your mortgage with, say, for instance, a MasterCard, and the mortgage is say $1,000, MasterCard is only going to get $995, and so then it's like, well, where's that other $5 coming from? They want every penny.
Yeah. Yeah, that is absolutely true. I personally, I've had a few banks over the years. I've been with Citibank, Bank of America, J.P. Morgan Chase. Primarily, I just use credit cards for all my purchases. Uh, Maybe occasionally I might use a credit card. Excuse me, an ATM debit card if I go to an ATM to pull out some cash, but that's very rare. Very rare. 90% of the time I'm using a credit card. So I have a Visa and a MasterCard, and I have one through Capital One and the other one through USAA. So
Yeah.
but I think Super Tree has hit it on something that's very important though, is when you go to the gas station and being careful not to use your debit card at gas stations, and buy and please don't use your ATM debit card at these shiesty looking ATM machines that you find in like these gas stations or nightclubs or something like that.
Yeah, that's a very good point too. Super Trish brought up. Someone who works in cybersecurity, I have to look at a lot of this stuff. So code reviews and point of sale systems and how they're designed, and how we have to mitigate against risk when dealing with those. So you're seeing less and less of it now because of AML, anti-money laundering, and uh, other risk assessments that are involved in this. But it still happens from time to time. This is usually these these sort of rogue solutions that you want to fill up the air in your tire. Here, you can just swipe your credit card here. I don't think so. I'll put 4 quarters in there. Thank you very much. There's all types of little systems now that want to have these electronic point of sales operations built into them, and I don't, there's no way to really verify if they've been approved, or what kind of who the source of the system is.
Well, I think, Mike, you
Blindly
probably want
trusting.
to ask yourself, like when you're accessing some of these systems, it's like, okay, what is the cost of the technology to secure a system like that, and the technology that quote unquote security system is attached to? Do you really think an air compressor at a gas station is going to employ expensive cybersecurity to protect your personal information? You probably don't want to use your card there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, it all depends, man. Realistically, they should not be able to put a machine out there that has not passed certain requirements for PCI DSS standards. But it happens, and we don't know, because it's very simple to set up a box with a Raspberry Pi, and a card skimmer, and put a 3G, 4G hotspot inside there, and collect that information, all that credit card information that passes right through there, and basically just be ciphering off all that sensitive data. That's not uncommon. It's unfortunate that it still happens, man, but and they target predominantly Black areas, because the lack of financial literacy in these areas. Just as something as basic as when, and where to use your debit card, and should you actually be using your debit card at all.
Yeah, I think if you're primarily a credit card user, if you're really minimizing your use of an ATM debit card, I definitely think folks should consider getting some type of cash back credit card. That's especially if you're going to be almost exclusively using a credit card for your purchases and stuff like that.
And also, you want to look at the actual percentage rates on a credit card, as far as I'm sorry, the annual fee. Some cards charge an annual fee, which will cut into your cash back. So you got to weigh that. If you're getting a cash back of X amount, but you got to pay annual fee, that annual fee may negate any benefit you get from cash back. So weigh that in, and also make sure that you periodically check your actual your accounts. Like for me, I check my finances at least twice a day. When I wake up, before I go to bed, and usually several points in between, I consistently and constantly check my accounts, and I'm checking for fraudulent activity. I'm seeing what is posted, seeing what's coming in. I want to know what's going out. I want to know exactly when it happened, because a lot of times, something can happen right under your nose, but because you haven't been monitoring it, by the time you go to actually resolve that situation, it's going to take a long time to get that stuff squared away with either the bank or the credit card company. So you want to kind of catch that stuff early if there's some type of activity going on that you haven't authorized.
You can also set up alerting. I get an alert every single purchase, every single deposit that's made on my accounts. So it goes straight to my phone. So I'm either getting a vibrated alert, or I'm getting some form of a silent alert that some activity has happened in real time. So,
but the problem with that, Mike, is that, like, say for instance, you got a Puerto Rican Boost Mobile like complex.
He said Puerto Rican. That's his. I don't know, man. Puerto Rican. He didn't say Boost Mobile. He said Puerto Rican Boost Mobile.
Yeah, that was great. That was great.
It's this. And there's nothing wrong with Boost Mobile, man. I don't think I have never heard anybody complain about Boost Mobile at all. Shout out to Boost Mobile.
Yeah, something else. I have a credit monitoring service. I have a prepaid legal service that I'm a member of, and so and also comes with a membership for something called Identity Shield. So I have both, and I get daily updates, and so get automatically, I get $1 million line of protection in event of fraud or anything like that, of identity theft. So these are just some ways that folks can look to protect themselves. So
yeah, let me get to this next article, and it's actually not even an article, it's actually a video, but I'm not going to play it because we'll get flagged for even doing it. But I just wanted to focus on this this delicious thing right here.
Mike, you a colorist.
oh man, you jelly, man. You mad jelly.
Not even gonna lie, she's sexy.
Yeah, definitely. All right, let me stop looking at that before I get myself into some serious trouble out here. We got like 3 more articles to go. Actually, got 2 more articles to go. We'll be done. All right, next one is from Bloomberg.com. China indicates it won't retaliate now on new U.S. tariffs. China indicated that it wouldn't immediately retaliate against the latest U.S. tariff increase announced by President Donald Trump last week, emphasizing the need to discuss ways to de-escalate the trade war between the world's 2 largest economies. So this one's behind a paywall again, but basically China basically wants to help Trump out, from my interpretation of this, because the more this trade war escalates, the harder it hits the United States, and you can see it being reverberated through retail, through the labor sector, through the manufacturing sector, just a various amount of markets. And China is actually taking their foot off the neck of the administration and giving them time to breathe. Make sure they're not down for the 10 count.
Yeah, we gotta. I think the rising dollar is going to bring this whole tariff war to a close. We're not going to be able to continue to fight it because the stronger dollar makes. How does this go? It's confusing. It's like it makes the products, our domestic products, when we sell them into other countries, it makes them even more expensive. So that's got nothing to do with tariffs. That's just the dollar going up. So now you add tariffs to that. We can't afford it. We really, not that we could afford it before. It's just going to be even more difficult to continue in this path. So I think this tariff war is just going to end. I think both sides are going to say no mas.
I don't get the strategy. All right, let's break this down. Let's analyze it. So, okay, they're smart people. They know this was going to happen, right? So, what was their strategy? What was the end game of this? Was it more for? Was this really for Trump to solidify himself? You know, solidify his seat for the next term, or what was it? What was the end game? Because I don't get it. Because literally, he shot his own people in the foot. Trump by doing this. So I don't get it.
The idea is to wound China's or injure China's ability to expand. The other option is to get into a military conflict with them and shut down their trade routes.
I don't think China cares though, because they devalued their own currency not too long ago, didn't it?
They've always devalued their currency, and that's what Trump has been arguing, that they've been devaluing their currency. They haven't played fair, and they had to devalue it in order to get the manufacturing base, to secure their manufacturing base, right? Because that's how they pay their that's how the cost of labor is so cheap in China, because the value of their currency is so low.
Do they have a bottom?
Their bottom is prison labor at that point. Yeah, but they can afford to go low. United States, they can't afford to do that. I mean, you look at the big three automotive manufacturing sector. You had guys in Detroit making $32 an hour putting on bumpers on cars, dashboards. It's kind of difficult if you're Detroit to compete with Mexico that was paying those guys $4 an hour. It's kind of hard for them to compete with China when China is paying their guys 90 cents an hour.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. I don't think that I don't even think it's Trump. I think whoever telling them, I don't think China got something up their sleeve. And I think that everybody got comfortable with the US dollar. And now people wiggling out from underneath it.
But see, what happens? What happens? Like maybe on the next presidential cycle, when these tariffs are obliterated, and these companies have gone under. Now you have a void, and so then you allow China back in, and China already has basically an answer to everything in the United States. They already have their own car companies that they've been trying to get into U.S. market, Chery, Gia, Geely, whatever, and all these other companies, and and so now you're gonna have China just swoop right on in.
Well, they're dominating Latin America right now. So the most popular new vehicle in Latin America is actually Chinese vehicles. They've surpassed American vehicles in Latin America. So from the bottom of Mexico all the way down to Argentina, nothing but Chinese vehicles down here.
Well, see, that's what I'm saying. Like, if China is expanding to the Caribbean, Africa, and everywhere else, like it will almost be like a economic suicide not to deal with China at some point, right?
Yeah, but you have to keep in mind who you're talking about here. You're talking about people who really are fully invested into white supremacy. They really don't believe in having any parity with anybody. So they're willing to hurt, their own people to make, to keep anybody from surpassing them. And if that means sending people to war, then so be it. If that means that farmers have to starve financially and be out of business, then so be it. That's how far they're willing to go with this.
Well,
Uh,
I mean,
Dang.
we know how far they're willing to go. Just the existence of nuclear weaponry or the
right.
continued existence of nuclear weaponry is evidence enough that before they allow their country to be taken over, they'll destroy everything.
Yep. Yep. All right. Let me hit this last article, and then we can open up for dialogue, and then we'll jump into another car talk hangout and talk about that four-cylinder Mustang and the C8. All right, this one from CNBC.com. China will likely wait out the trade war as it bets on its own economy. China's best option in the trade war is to wait it out, experts say, as its huge domestic economy is increasingly being driven by the power of its consumers, not trade. Playing the long game is probably the best and only option that China has, said Chung Man Wing, investment director at Value Partners. As trade tensions with the U.S. draw out, the world's second largest economy will likely seek to beef up its domestic economy, which contributes more to growth than its exports, according to analysts. The Chinese government is trying to buy time in terms of using the window to restructure the domestic economy. The domestic corporate sector, Chung told CNBC on Thursday. External trade make up only a very small portion of China's economy and form only 20% of its gross domestic product, he said. And majority of that is actually not to the US. So China can afford to play the long game and play it well. In fact, Deutsche Bank said in a Wednesday report that as much as 80% of China's exports went to countries other than the US. We describe China's current strategy as endurance. The main goal is to preserve China's economic resilience while taking the higher US tariffs as a given fact. Deutsche economist Yi Jiang wrote in the report. The protracted trade war with the US has gone on for more than a year and shows no signs of abating. China said last Friday it would impose new tariffs on $75 billion worth of American goods. In retaliation, US President Donald Trump said he would hike tariff rates on $550 billion of imports from China. But ANZ economists pointed to how China's headline gross domestic product number was barely affected, even after its exports started to drop in 2018 when the trade war began. The trade impact growth was overrated, ANZ said in a Wednesday report, pointing out that China's first half GDP growth this year was still 6.3%, even with tariffs already affecting its exports. The trade war uncertainty led the Chinese government to lower its growth target of between 6% and 6.5% for 2019, compared to last year's roughly 6.5%. But China's growth is domestically driven. Consumption and infrastructure investment deserve more attention than exports, the ANZ economist wrote. While China's economy has slowed, the direct contribution of the trade war does not seem to be very large, Deutsche Bank's Jiang wrote. Instead, he said, slowing growth could largely be attributed to a decline in government investment, higher household debt, and deleveraging efforts, the process of reducing debt. So I talked about this earlier that China can play the long game, and for the for the foreseeable future. I don't think that the United States can actually hold out for this, because the U.S. economy is a lot more fragile and not as resilient as China's. They can absorb a lot of these things because they produce a lot of goods for export purposes. And as the article stated, 80% of their stuff doesn't even go to the United States. It actually goes to other places now. So one of the other tricks I think that China has done is they've overproduced a lot of goods in certain areas, in certain markets. So what happens with that is they never really miss a beat in terms of um, GDP exportation losses, right? So they can afford to produce a lot of goods for cheap and overproduce them for the same price and still make a return on investment on the overproduced goods, despite the fact that it could lower and create a bubble for them in the near future. But they can still do all of that and not be affected, like the article states. It was still 6.5% from 2018 to 2019, despite the 25% rate on the tariffs. It's almost unaffected. So China's in a very good position for this whole entire debacle. Anybody else have anything you want to add to this?
I think you're right, man. They're gonna win this war. You're right, because just look at the numbers. You know, just so large, man. And I think people are looking at this the wrong way. We need to look at this as a learning lesson. Like how was China able to, be a foreign nation, right, to what it is right now? And I think us as a people need to learn from this, because this is remarkable. I know it's our someone said it's our enemy, but you have to respect their power. Like you have to learn from this.
Oh, Chinese. We went over this for gold dollars and not gold dollars and power. The coming war on China with John Pilger, right? We posted that on the community tab, and the only people that were able to watch it was myself and the Gone. Everybody else kind of are playing catch up with it if they have not watched it already. They treated Chinese people, according to the documentary, the same way they treated Black people in America coming out of slavery. I mean, one for one, bar for bar, same playbook. They dehumanized them. They had the cartoons and artwork and just dehumanizing of Chinese people, and the way Chinese people lived in poverty, very similar to that of Black people coming out of slavery, or even being in slavery for that matter. At the end of defining the tenure of slavery. Point that I'm making here is that I think we have learned some lessons, but we have not done a deep dive analysis of China's rise to power. If you think about what happened between 1975 and 2003, 100 million people lifted out of poverty. That's significant when you're having a conversation about Black people in the Western Hemisphere and how they can actually learn from a lot of these things. I mean, one child per household policies and all types of things that they've implemented actually got them to where they are right now. And China didn't have a rapid transit system until 2008. That was, they didn't have a bullet train or even a heavy rail train until 2008.
But I noticed about them is they weren't afraid to sacrifice. And I think that ties into what Dr. Phoenix was just saying about sacrifice, right? Because as a whole, they sacrificed to get to this point. Like when you look at the I think it was the Beijing Games, like they were proud, right? Because they suffered, but they arrived. So I think us as a whole, we need to truly focus and meditate on sacrificing, right, for the common good, and things like this can happen, man. Like it's just we just power. You didn't recognize their power, man. Like that. That's remarkable how they played a long game, and they went from being from behind to like number one, number two. We're going to be number one real soon, but we're number two right now, which is remarkable. So again, it's all about sacrifice, I think.
Well, it's also about learning, right? The ability to reverse engineer products is very crucial in a manufacturing and production sector of the economy, especially in the supply chain aspect. So they're able to take just about 99% of goods that come into the country, whether it's military base or civilian base, and actually reverse engineer it. If you look at a lot of their cars in China, a lot of those cars that that are supposed to be European are not really European cars. They've reverse engineered the Mercedes and the BMW for themselves. Very weird as it may be, there are no intellectual property laws in China that they have to adhere to on the international stage. It's not like anybody could sue them for reverse engineering the Buick, right? I mean, who buys a Buick?
The copyright laws only apply to Chinese people in China.
Right. Right. Outside of China, it doesn't have any teeth.
Yeah, but you know what, Mike? A lot of the things that we have made over there, they make the counterfeit in the same factory.
Oh yeah. Gucci flip flops for you, and a Dodge Challenger with like a 4-cylinder engine.
with a black ice air freshener.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, man.
So how do
Absolutely.
how do you stop that? You can't.
You can't really stop it. I mean, you can go in there and try to sabotage their economy by putting tariffs on all their goods, but from the article we just read and a lot of analysis that we've done over the last couple of years, I don't think that's really stopping them unless you get into military conflict and stop the shipments of goods.
Yeah, but at the bottom of it is they play the capitalist society better than we do.
Mm-hmm. Well, because they're not a capitalist society, they're actually a market-based economy. That's what they refer to themselves as. So there's a difference. But in order for you to understand what I'm talking about, you have to see that documentary that we posted, The Coming War on China. It's a very probably one of the best documentaries I've seen produced in the last couple of years on anything geopolitical.
Okay.
It's in the community tab. So if you go through the community tab on the Black Brain Trust, it's posted
Okay.
there. It's a 90-minute documentary, so make sure you take that into consideration.
Yeah, I got a friend of mine. He does camera and security stuff, and he imported a lot of stuff over there. And before they started doing the trade war popped off, they was already having issues with I guess China was uploading surveillance type stuff that was streaming information back to them or something like that. And
Yeah.
they almost my friend almost went under with his business because he wasn't able to get his shipments in.
Mm-hmm. You saying because of the tariffs?
Well, no, before the tariffs, they had something where China was embedding like spyware into the security systems that he was uh bringing in,
Mm-hmm.
and they stopped all that stuff. They wouldn't even allow it into the country through the ports.
Yeah, China's been known to embed spyware into the firmware of their electronic devices, which is why we had these USB fans that were being purchased out of China, and people would plug them into their laptops at work and their desktops, and these things were accessing data, what we call data crawling on your endpoint on your desktop and your laptop. Data crawling means that there is a line of code or a couple of lines of code written to specifically gather information from a source without your without your acknowledgement or with your acknowledgement, but basically retrieve all this data, collectivize it, and then send it back out. And what it was doing was it was rerouting it back out to China, and that was a clever trick that they came up with, and they did that to all electronic devices, whether it was a Teddy Ruxpin or a USB fan or these easy bake oven toys and stuff like that, collecting information, listening to you, spying on you through your
Yo,
webcam and stuff like that.
that's wild, man. The security system that he set up at my house, the stuff is so high quality, man. Like it could be in the midnight, but it'll show color like it's broad daylight. And like these cameras can zoom in like way down the street. Like it's real good, high quality stuff, but it was cheap.
Mhm. Well, let me answer Paul Bryan's question. He says, is that why Huawei phones aren't allowed in America? It's not Huawei phones that they're worried about. It's the Huawei telecom systems that are constantly collecting data from the grids. AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, T-Mobile, all those towers have Huawei in what's the other one? ZTE equipment in them. And as they're processing a lot of this information, they're actually sending it back out. So that's what they were worried about. If you look at the African Union headquarters that was built by the Chinese was actually spying on all of the Africans having their meetings through that Huawei equipment.
I didn't know that. So what type of data are they extracting? Like
Everything that can be harnessed, whether you said it out loud or you typed it into a system, they were gathering that information. That's one of the reasons why the government doesn't use Lenovo, because Lenovo is a Chinese manufacturing brand. When IBM sold their systems to Lenovo back in 2005, the government had to stop using IBM for that very reason. Those ThinkPads, those think centers and stuff like that were actually collecting a lot of information. Well, not collecting a lot of information, but they were actually used as government assets. But if you have a Chinese brand like Lenovo now supplying those assets, they don't really trust it. So
I was reading an article. I know a lot of Huawei communication systems are embedded in a lot of small towns in the U.S. So it's like, do they have an alternative to that? Another company that they can use, because they're already built into the infrastructure, right? So what's the alternative? What are they gonna do?
in terms of what, 5G?
Replacing, well, I'm saying in terms of replacing Huawei's hardware, like their hardware. Like, do you have another alternative to use, or that's all they have?
Well, they're hoping that somebody like Juniper or somebody else comes along, or Cisco comes along, but they haven't actually come up with the equipment yet. What the United States just wants to do is make sure that Huawei or the Chinese government doesn't actually accelerate past American companies. Whoever leads the market can write the standards, and the United States has zero interest in following Chinese standards.
Or perhaps that's why a lot of some of the Chinese products are significantly cheaper than the competitors, is because they're able to offset production costs with the data that they gather illicitly.
Mm-hmm.
And that brings back that age-old saying, if it sounds too good to be true, maybe it is. In consumerism America, we're looking to get the greatest value for our dollar and try to leverage the least amount of capital for the greatest amount of resources.
Mm-hmm.
And we're always searching for that competitive price point,
Mm-hmm.
and not taking into consideration, that nothing is free. That savings comes at a cost, whether it be now or it be later on down the line, but somebody has to pay for it.
Well, keep in mind that Huawei was born out of espionage. So Nortel, the telecommunications company in America, had their intellectual property ripped off by China, which created Huawei, which thus stole a lot of the intellectual property from Cisco, who the United States government and military uses for the defense contracts. So they took all of that intellectual property and created Huawei out of it, and that's how Huawei became who they are right now. So espionage and intellectual property theft and things like that. That's what Trump is talking about. He's not really talking so much about, you know, vehicles and stuff like that. You know, Buick being copied. He's really talking about those critical assets of what China has been duplicating for so long and then selling it back on the market.
The irony in all of this is that this country wasn't founded on fairness. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like they really get beat at your own game.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Paul Bryant in the chat asked, are the Huawei phones better than the iPhone? I had a Huawei phone. I had a Mate 9 Pro. It was the best Android phone I've ever owned. And
yeah, those Huawei phones are a beast, man. I like them. I usually use Notes, but yeah, I like Huawei phones.
I ain't even gonna front the the laptop that they pretty much made a MacBook Pro, and people were complaining about the way the keys felt on the MacBook Pro. They switched it up. Huawei came out with a laptop that was like fast as the new one, and it felt like the old one. And that laptop is killing it right now.
Well, guess who makes the Apple products? Who manufactures the Apple products? Foxconn. Foxconn also manufactures who? Huawei.
Yeah. Laptop is actually a good deal.
Right. Right. I mean, all they did was transfer some of that intellectual property for themselves. You know, Apple was willing to take that risk. That's on Apple. You know, Apple wanted to produce a cheaper product in China, and thus they had to transfer some of that intellectual property over. And that's why you see the Huawei phones, you know, perform the way that they do. They basically copied a lot of the features from the iPhone and made it into an Android phone.
The phone you talking about is the blue glass phone? It's got a blue glass.
That's the Mate 20. I think that's what you're referring to. That's like a 7-inch phone. It's like one of the biggest smartphones you can buy right now.
Yeah, one of the guys I work with got that phone, and he loved it.
Yeah, there might have been various versions to it, but the new one I'm talking about just came out maybe a week or so ago. You won't get it in America. You can buy it in Europe. I know they make a special one for Germany, especially, but in terms of buying it in America, you can't buy it. And if you do try to order it, then what happens is it gets stopped at customs. You'll probably get a phone call from somebody.
Yeah, it's got different SIM cards on it too, so you can travel with it.
Yeah, most Chinese phones have dual SIM cards.
Wow.
My OnePlus has dual SIM cards.
Yeah, I normally use like I said, I usually use Samsung phones, but I have used a couple of the Huawei phones, and I would, as much as I love my Notes, I would probably say they're up there with the Notes for sure.
Yeah, I actually bought the laptop after I heard Joe Rogan was talking about it, and I went and I looked it up.
The laptop is real nice. Yeah.
And I bought it, and I'll be damned, it was everything they said it was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Huawei is the new Samsung, for all intents and purposes.
Yeah, I think they kind of got a little bit of the kibosh put on them earlier in the year with with banning them from Google or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they're back on track, and I don't know. I got this Note 10 coming here soon, so.
You just had to have it.
You damn right. No, but I've used it in the store, so I don't know. I got to see what they're gonna do with their Mate series coming out. I think next month or October or something like that.
Yeah, the 20X is already out now.
Okay.
Yeah, 20X is 7 inches compared to the Samsung Note. So
yeah, the Note 10 Plus is 6.8, so it's right up there.
Yeah, the Huawei is 7.1, so keep that in mind.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's like
Can I ask you something?
Go right ahead, bro.
From a computer standpoint, you probably know the answer to this, Mike. Do you ever foresee the Apple operating system on non-Apple products like you
No,
see
that's never
Windows?
gonna happen. Never gonna happen.
Okay.
That's Apple's that's their secret sauce. That's their Apple sauce, for lack of a better description. If they give that away, then it's game over.
Okay, well, let me ask you this from a computer guy standpoint. The Apple operating system is just that, an operating system. Couldn't you take that operating system and place it on a non-Apple product? Maybe obviously it wouldn't be authorized, but is it possible?
No, because
It's not. Oh, okay.
it needs a bootloader, and the bootloader is hard coded to the Apple machine itself.
Oh, okay.
You can try to copy it, but it won't boot without the bootloader. So, but yeah, I think they have a special Huawei mate phone for the African market too. I wanted to cover it. I think I might cover it tomorrow on the global African chat that we're gonna have tomorrow night. And really trying to dig into it, because I was reading some articles early this week about smartphone market growth in Africa is going to be exponential in 2020. So, and we talked about this, I think maybe last year or early this year, about we had a Black Tech talk about Africa mobile OS development. Writing code, writing applications is going to be crucial. Now that Huawei has introduced their new operating system that Google kind of dropped the ball on, Huawei is actually ahead of the curve now with their operating system. It doesn't have a whole lot of application support because of the trade war, and it doesn't allow Facebook, Google, and YouTube and the other social media platforms to actually appear on their devices. So there's going to be an opportunity to create a Black social media platform that can actually go on to those devices, because the Huawei device, the Huawei company actually is the #2 and soon to be #1 smartphone maker in the world.
Yeah, they're probably gonna overtake Samsung probably within the next year.
They already did.
Isn't Facebook banned in China?
I don't think it's banned.
It's not banned. It's not banned. It's they have their own restrictions. That's all.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, everybody uses WeChat in China, so
Yeah.
that's their version of social media.
Okay.
Fellas, I'm gonna have to bail out. I'm trying to catch up with some family in Florida. Check on them with regards to the storm. You guys have a great weekend. And the folks listening, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, Dollar Will, do so. I'm gonna drop some more stock update videos this weekend, this 3-day weekend. So peace to everybody.
Hey,
All right, have a good one, brother.
All right, peace,
All right.
brother.
All right, I think we can wrap it up now, but if you have not already hit the like button, please hit the like button now. Hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust, including those on the community tab. And we're actually going to be back in the next 5 minutes, because I definitely want to take a deeper dive into the C8, what the latest news is on the C8, and
Are we talking about the Z06?
yes.
Okay, because
Yeah.
I read a couple of articles over
hey,
the last couple of days.
Yeah.
Hey, they just released pictures of what's supposed to be the new Subaru STI 2-door.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we're gonna get into all that. We're gonna get into all that.
They talk about some engine changes too. So yeah, we can talk about that as well.
All right, thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you in 5 minutes if you care to join us.